Well, Well, here's a check of your news. A group of uninhabited islands in the East China Sea are creating quite an issue these days. China and Japan are at odds over who owns the islands and the rumored oil reserves underneath them. Relations between Asia's two biggest economies have ended badly since September 11th. Then Japan bought the disputed islands from a private owner. If this dispute escalates, it will damage the progress and recovery of the world economy. We're going to talk about this with an expert and why it matters to us in about 14 minutes.
6:14 is your time now. Relations between Asia's two biggest economies, China and Japan, have been suffering recently. Over what? Well, a group of uninhabited islands in the East China Sea that both countries claim to own. Japan bought the islands in September from a private owner, and the decision has hurt bilateral trade ties, reduced tourism, and has sparked protests across China and Japan, and even has some citizens calling for war. Joining us now live this morning is Professor Michael Strausz from Texas Christian University in Fort Worth. He is an expert in Japanese politics. Good morning, Dr. Strausz.
Hi, good morning.
First question. The most immediate question I have is this happens over in the East China Sea. Why do people here in the United States, even here in the Midwest, need to care about something like this?
Well, the first reason is that Japan is an extremely important ally of the United States. And actually, we have 50,000 U.S. troops stationed in Japan, including about 25,000 stationed in Okinawa, an island that's actually quite close to the Senkaku Islands. So there's a lot of Americans right there, right on top of this. The second reason is that, as you said, these are the second and third biggest economies in the world. So if this tension were to escalate, this could have a really major impact on the global economy, including in the United States as well.
And how would it affect the world economy? I know a lot of things, people kind of joke everything's made in China, but there are a lot of things made in China, also Japan, and even Taiwan, which is over in that section of the world.
Right, and Taiwan claims the islands too, and actually they've sent boats there as well. So, it's hard to say precisely how. If Japan and China were to really stop economically interacting with each other, the second and third biggest economies, that would have, as the world is trying to recover from a recession, that would slow things down a lot. But I should note that Japan and China have had a lot of recent sort of crises. The relationship ebbed and flowed. This isn't the only time this has happened. This looks pretty severe, but it's not the only example of tensions between these two countries. So we shouldn't just assume that things are going to progress out of control, because it has happened before.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And why hasn't this made national news? It seems like a lot of the unrest is in the Middle East and Syria, but if this is going on, it's going to affect us so importantly. Why isn't this making the news headlines?
Well, I mean, I think, as I said, I think it's really important. No one's died, compared to what's happening in Syria and what happened in Libya. So, in terms of, there's only so much time to devote to international news. So perhaps, places where people have actually been dying recently have been getting the headlines. But I think this is really important too, and we should definitely pay attention to what's going on here as well. What, if anything, is the Obama administration doing about this dispute? Well, Obama, as far as I know, hasn't taken a position on who controls the islands. That's pretty who legitimately owns the islands, and that's pretty standard for the U.S. We usually don't take positions on this kind of territorial dispute, but because we're bound to protect Japan by the security treaty, by the treaty of alliance between the two countries. So, should it come to war, which is unlikely, but I think the U.S. would be obligated to defend Japan. So.
Interesting.
Could become much more involved.
And something we failed to mention, the reason the islands are of such interest to them is because there's oil reserves there, correct?
That's right, okay. Yes, underwater. Yes, that's a part of it. I think that's a big part of it. Okay. But I think also countries just really like their territory, and they view it as, not negotiable. And I think that's the issue. Japan has a number of island disputes, and so does China with its neighbors. And some of them there are resources like here, some of them there aren't. But in general, they just say, this is our territory, and we are not going to negotiate on it.
All right. Well, Dr. Michael Strausz, thanks so much for joining us and shedding some light on this very important subject.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Take care.